Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As president of the Gamma of Virginia chapter of Phi Beta Kappa, I am very happy to welcome you to the annual Phi Beta Kappa Society of the Cincinnati Convocation. This year marks the 101st year of Phi Beta Kappa at Washington and Lee. It's one of the most important events of our school year, and this occasion brings us together to honor those who have truly excelled in their pursuit of knowledge, as evidenced by their exceptional academic records. Since its inception at the College of William and Mary in 1776, the Phi Beta Kappa Society has inducted as members individuals whose character and scholarly attainments exemplify its principles and ideals. In light of the fact that chapters of Phi Beta Kappa exist at only the very best colleges and universities, election to membership in the society is an honor rightly to be cherished and celebrated. For those whom the Gamma of Virginia chapter will initiate into Phi Beta Kappa later today have realized impressive academic achievements across the broad spectrum of the liberal arts. As outstanding scholars of good moral character, they deserve to be elected to the society. In a moment, we shall recognize them, after which we will hear from our distinguished guest speaker, who is able to join us today through the generosity and support of the Society of the Cincinnati and the President's Office. Now I would like to take a moment to recognize Phi Beta Kappa's long-standing relationship with the Society of the Cincinnati and the common bond these two societies share: devotion to our country and to Washington and Lee. In 1783, in response to a near revolt by disgruntled veterans of the Continental Army, General Washington's Chief of Artillery proposed a fraternal and philanthropic organization to preserve, quote, those exalted rights and liberties of human nature, end quote, for which the revolution has been fought. Washington agreed to serve as first President General of the new society, the Society of the Cincinnati, which took its name from the Roman hero Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus. According to legend, he was appointed dictator to defend Rome against enemies who had surrounded the Roman army. He saved Rome in 16 days, relinquished power, and then returned home to his farm. Among the early members of the society were 6 men who had attended Liberty Hall Academy, or one of its earlier incarnations, and several vigorous advocates of the young school, including General Washington himself and the celebrated light horse Harry Lee, who would become the father of Robert E. Lee. Yet another advocate for the school was Major Alexander Stewart, who had donated 40 acres to Liberty Hall in 1776. He later fought bravely but was captured at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse in North Carolina. At the same battle, his son, Archibald Stewart, an Augusta Academy alumnus who became president of the Phi Beta Kappa chapter at William and Mary, and who carried the society's seal into battle with him. In 1802, the Society of the Cincinnati ceded its treasury of approximately $25,000 to Washington College. That gift, as well as bequests from General Washington and jockey John Robinson, constituted the school's entire endowment at the time. The gift from the Society of the Cincinnati continues to support both this convocation and an endowed chair in the mathematics department. With the Society's gift also came some stipulations that the university continues to honor. One was that the college institute studies in fortification and gunnery. Sure enough, those of you who have attended this convocation before may recall that such a course is still offered by the mathematics department. I suppose this is a logical choice, as they are funded by the Society of the Cincinnati Foundation. The course is called Military Engineering. It carries no credit and has no course number, but I did verify that the 2011-2012 course catalog states that for qualified students who may request it, a course in fortifications, gunnery, and ballistics will be offered. Recognition not only of the Society of Cincinnati's generosity to Washington and Lee, but also of its support for our liberal arts mission has become quite suitably linked with today's celebration of the university's outstanding young scholars. We of Phi Beta Kappa continue to be deeply grateful to the Society of the Cincinnati. In a few minutes, I will call upon our chapter secretary-treasurer, Phi Beta Kappa member Janet Ikeda, to announce the names of those recently elected to membership in our society. Dr. Ikeda will also bring to your attention some particularly noteworthy scholarly attainments of several additional students. One of the awards to be presented is the Phi Beta Kappa Jbrown Gering Award, given annually to the sophomore with the most outstanding academic record in his or her class during the first 4 terms at Washington and Lee. The award is named for a man who truly exemplifies Phi Beta Kappa at Washington and Lee, Dr. Jbrown Gering. Dr. Gering, a chemistry professor at Washington and Lee for 38 years, served as secretary-treasurer of the Gamma of Virginia chapter of Phi Beta Kappa for 22 of those years. We will now continue with our current Secretary-Treasurer, Janet Ikeda, who will present the 2012 initiates to Phi Beta Kappa. As each student's name is called, he or she will come forward. Please hold your applause until all of those from each academic class are assembled. Dr. Ikeda.
Last year, the Gamma of Virginia chapter of Phi Beta Kappa elected to membership as juniors 20 members of the class of 2012 and recognized them here in Lee Chapel. I'd like to read their names. Laura Ann Ball, Austin Streetman Brandstetter, Laura Christine Campbell, Samuel G. Campbell, Alex I. Finnegan, John Rockbridge Grigsby, Kelly Therese Harris, Kelly Lee Gerald, Dominika Roxana Khrushchevska, Virginia Lovell, Danielle Nicole Moore, Franco Moiso, Tamara Jean Morse, James V. Paudino II, Andrew Joseph Ronaldo, Ian Rutherford Sturdy, Brooke Lata Sutherland, Christopher John Washnock, John Anderson Wells IV, and Sherry Loudon. 3 of those students elected as a junior last year missed the convocation, and so I'd like 3 of them who are here today to stand and receive belated but well-deserved recognition for their achievements. Please stand. Tamara J. Morse. Ian Rutherford Sturdy. And Sherry Yadlin. Thank you, and congratulations. And now for this year's initiates. New initiates, as I read your name, please come up on stage and face the audience, and remain on stage until all your classmates have been recognized. To the audience, please hold your applause until all the new initiates are on stage, and we'll be doing this in 2 groups. First, we'll do our initiates from the classes of 2011 and 2012. We elect a handful of members from the just graduated class based on their final grades. This year, we welcome 3 members of the class of 2011. Jean Chandler Glass Chapman, Edward William Malachowski in absentia, Nicole Rose in absentia. We will now recognize the initiates from the class of 2012. Lauren J. Acker, Hannah Elizabeth Agard, Anthony Joseph Ballor, Lauren Ann Borden, Camille Morgan Cobb in absentia. Michael DeCimbrito. Nicholas Albert Joyoso. Chelsea Elizabeth Carter Glockner. Bradley Harder. David Benjamin Hosler. Jasmine Marie Jimenez. Eleanor Patricia Kennedy. Samuel Mercado Rios in absentia. Ann Morris. Patrick Anthony Oley. Barbara Sorrell Pete. Melissa McRae Powell. Olivia Marin Riffle. David Severson. Quan C. Roger Strong. Lauren Ashley Tipton. Erica Lee Vaughn. Raisa Velasco Castedo. Congratulations. Thank you. And now members of the class of 2013. Their individual grade point averages place them in the top 5% of the junior class. Megan Elizabeth Bach. Max Laitman Chapnick. Aubrey Caitlin Charnigo. Violet Ruth Shartok in absentia. Upal Esson. Amanda Marie Growalski. Ali Hamid. Clark Lassiter Hildebrand in absentia. Maggie Lynn Holland. Joseph Roger Landry. Joe LaSala. Carrie Ann Elise Lawbuck. Andrew Channing Martin. Hung Wen. Tamar Ostrom. Gina Park. Rachel Lee Petrie. Lauren Elizabeth Schultz. Catherine Diarmond Stewart. Beryl Tran in absentia. Robert Griffin Vestal. And Kayla Aletha Welch in absentia. Congratulations. Thank you. From time to time, our chapter elects honorary and alumni members as specified in our Constitution. An honorary member is defined as other persons who are distinguished in letters, education, or public service. An alumni member is defined as alumni of Washington and Lee University of not less than 10 years standing who have distinguished themselves since graduation. Please join me in congratulating our speaker and new honorary member, Angel L. Harris. And our new alumni member from the class of 1962 is Mr. Rupert H. Johnson, Jr., in absentia. Rupert Johnson is recognized for his outstanding contributions to the worlds of business and education. I also have the pleasure of announcing the winners of 2 other awards. First is the Phi Beta Kappa Jbrown Gering Award. As Professor Diet already explained, but I'll just briefly remind you, the award is named for Professor Dr. Jbrown Gering, someone who really exemplifies for us the Phi Beta Kappa spirit at Washington and Lee University. We present this award to the sophomore who has achieved the most outstanding academic record during his first 4 terms at WNL. I'd like this member of the class of 2014 to stand and receive our congratulations. Andrew M. Saradinsky. Congratulations. Second is the Edward Lee Penny Prize. The Student Affairs Committee gives it to an undergraduate or undergraduates who, in the words of the prize, demonstrate extraordinary commitment both to personal scholarship and to the nurturing of intellectual life at Washington and Lee. I'd like him to stand and receive our congratulations from the class of 2012 and a Phi Beta Kappa Junior Initiate, Chris Washnuk. And now I return the podium to Professor Tim Diet, President of the Washington and Lee Chapter of Phi Beta Kappa. Professor Diet.
Thank you, Dr. Akeda. I would like to take a moment to share just a few observations with our newest members. Washington and Lee enjoys a national reputation for academic excellence. Assurance that this reputation will endure depends both on those who teach and on those who study here. For it is by our work's quality that the university will continue to be measured. You, the newest members of Phi Beta Kappa, do well to understand the honor and responsibility that is now yours. It has been and will continue to be a privilege to know you and to instruct you. By your accomplishments, you have earned our gratitude and highest commendation. You have clearly exhibited your desire to embrace and uphold the love of learning, open-minded inquiry, lively debate, and free flow of information that stem from the liberal arts tradition. Qualities that are sorely needed in today's world of sound bites and 140-character discussions on Twitter. I challenge you to keep these qualities and one more, humility, in mind throughout your life as you represent Washington and Lee around the country and the world. Acknowledge and embrace the complexity of the world and appreciate the nuances that often complicate debates. Be an ambassador of both Phi Beta Kappa and Washington and Lee by encouraging others to engage in open-minded inquiry and to search out new evidence to inform their beliefs and opinions. I now have the pleasure of introducing to you our speaker, Dr. Angel L. Harris, who will deliver our keynote address. He earned a BS in psychology from Grambling State University in 1997. He went on to Kansas State University to earn a master's in sociology in 1999, and finally on to the University of Michigan for a PhD in public policy and sociology in 2005 with a dissertation titled, "Do African Americans Really Resist School?" He was an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Austin in 2006-2007 before moving to Princeton University in 2007, where he is now a tenured associate professor in sociology and African American studies. Dr. Harris has an extensive publication record. He has written books coming out each of the last 2 years from Harvard University Press. In 2011, he authored Kids Don't Want to Fail, Oppositional Culture and the Black-White Achievement Gap. And coming out this year, he co-authored Raising Learners, Parental Involvement and School Achievement with Keith Robinson. He is published in leading journals such as Social Science Quarterly, Social Forces, and Sociology of Education. I first had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Harris at a conference a couple years ago when he presented his work. It was very clear he was asking important questions and applying rigorous methods. But in addition, he had a genuine passion for understanding young people, his subject of inquiry, and for using this new knowledge to take on widely held beliefs and educate both the public and policymakers. Therefore, he made my choice for this event an easy one, as his work represents someone living out what Phi Beta Kappa stands for. A love of learning is the guide of life. I'm very pleased to have a chance to welcome Dr. Harris to Washington and Lee. We are indeed privileged to have such a distinguished scholar here with us today. Please welcome Dr. Angel L. Harris.
So, one of the things that I always say is, I don't like ceremonies because I have no idea how long the speaker's going to speak for, and I feel like I'm captive and I don't know how much longer he has. So I'm conscious of that, but I'll try to make this interesting as well. So I have two basic things that I want to leave you with, but I'm going to start off with a narrative to provide some context as to why I'm going to say what I say at the end. So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And how many people here have been to New York City? Great. New York City is, it's a unique place. It's very urban, right? There aren't too many places like New York. So I grew up in Brooklyn, and I'm sure we all know someone who, that person who was born and lives in the same place where they were born, and they never really leave that area, and that's all they know is that one community or town. New Yorkers can be like that, native New Yorkers. For us, if you're from Brooklyn, really the world ends outside of Brooklyn. And that's it. That's really the universe. It's the center of the universe. So for me, growing up in Brooklyn, that's how it was. And so my life took place in a 10 to 15 block radius. Now, because it's New York, there was a lot within those 10 to 15 blocks, right? It's really densely populated. But I had no idea what was going on in the Bronx, Queens. I don't think anyone knows what's happening in Staten Island. Then there's, Manhattan, which is, it's very different from Brooklyn. And so that's where I was raised in what's known as Gowanus houses, which are low-income housing projects in Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn. And growing up, I was raised with my grandparents. So my parents passed away when I was 5. And so my grandmother had an 8th grade education, and my grandfather had a 3rd grade education. So their goal was for me to finish high school. College was not on the radar. I knew about Brooklyn College because we lived in Brooklyn. And I knew about LIU because they have a campus in Brooklyn, Long Island University. But Columbia was a country. I didn't know about Columbia University. I didn't know about Rutgers. I would have found it odd if you had said to me Arizona State, Penn State, University of Virginia. Why are you putting state and the name of a state and university in the same phrase? I wasn't a sports fan, so a college sports fan, so I wouldn't have come across Duke, UNC, things like that. So college was definitely not on the radar. I knew about NYU because Theo Huxtable went to NYU. So that's how I knew about NYU. And at one point, I actually wanted to attend Hillman. Not realizing that it was a fictitious school from the Cosby Show. But anyway, so in Brooklyn, college was definitely not on the radar. So I went to high school in Manhattan Center. It was a high school called Manhattan Center for Science and Math, where I proceeded to fail both science and math. And in a graduating class of 242 students, my class rank was 217. So I was in the 10th percentile. My GPA was 1.69, 4 years. So I barely finished. I had to go to summer school my last year to finish. So college was definitely not on the radar. Guidance counselor wasn't talking to me about it, but I don't think that guidance counselors spend time talking to students at the 10th percentile. So I wasn't on the radar. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to actually be a mortician. And so I would go to a funeral home about 3 blocks away and from where I lived, and I would, hang out there, and I really wanted to be an embalmer. Just what I wanted to do. And I thought, if you tell people, if people say, what do you do? I said, I'm an embalmer, or I'm a funeral director. They say, oh, okay, that's respectable. Plus, it doesn't matter what's happening with the economy. It's a foolproof profession. It doesn't matter. You're always going to have business. So this is what I want to do. And I saw this as something that was attainable, something that was doable. So I was investing in that direction in terms of my time and the kinds of schools that I was looking into were really trade schools that dealt with embalming more so than being a funeral director. I didn't want to talk to the people. I wanted to be in the back. So I had a friend in high school who had twin aunts, Danette and Darlene. And Danette and Darlene were, they had completed their undergraduate work at Cornell, and they were law students at the time. And they told me, Angel, you should really think about going to college. You should, try it out, see if you like it. So I thought, well, the idea of going to college was really foreign to me because for New Yorkers, it's very common for New Yorkers not to have a car, right? So you have public transportation. So I grew up in a family where we did not finance anything, right? We never owned a car, we never owned a home, and so the concept of financing didn't exist for me. So I thought that anytime you purchase something, you pay all, the total amount, and then it's yours. And so I thought that's how it was for college. You pay tuition, 4 years, total amount, and then you attend. So that was how I thought it worked. And then Ed said, no, there's financial aid, that's not how it works. So I said, okay. So they gave me some applications to complete. Lincoln in Pennsylvania, Hampton, Morgan State, and Grambling State. I'd never heard of these schools. I applied to the schools, and Grambling was the only school to accept me. And I was accepted on a provisional basis, pending my performance during the first year. Now, Grambling is in Louisiana. It's a historically black college in Louisiana. So I was not going to go to, I'd never left New York City, and the farthest I had traveled from New York was to go to Newark International Airport, which is like 8 miles from Manhattan. And that was because my family's from Puerto Rico, and so from time to time we would, go to Puerto Rico. Never, and even though my high school was in Manhattan, I took the 6 train, which goes along the east side, and so I never really ventured out into the west side. So it was interesting because after, when I would go to professional conferences, and there'd be a conference in New York, some of my colleagues would say, oh, we're going to your hometown, and I'd be thinking, you know a lot more about it than I do. So I wasn't going to go to Grambling. And Danette called, so now we're in August of '93. Danette says, look, are you going to go or not? And I said, well, I don't know how I'm going to make it there. She says, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. Just pack your stuff. So I go to my grandmother and I tell her, I'm going to Grambling State University. Now, the first time my grandmother ever heard the word Grambling was the day that I left for Grambling State University. Because I wasn't talking to her about this, right? It wasn't something that I was going to do for real. And so the idea of going to Grambling is the same as if you say, right after this ceremony, I'm actually going to Australia and catching a shuttle to the moon. It's that foreign, And so I tell my grandmother I'm going to Grambling, and she says, she has 3 major concerns. First, she asked me, is it in another country? I said, no, it's in Louisiana, and she had no idea what, where that was. So her concerns were, 1, I was 17 at the time, and I wasn't going to turn 18 until October. And the semester at Grambling starts in August. So there's going to be a window where I was going to be, a minor. And her thing was, what if something happens to you? I could be charged with neglect, right? Because you're not an adult. Her other concern was, how are you going to make it? How are you going to live? How are you going to survive? How are you going to, pay for food? And I'm trying to explain to her financial aid, which is just recently explained to me. And then her other concern was, she could not place me. And so her world consisted of this 10-block radius, and I was leaving the grid. I was falling off the face of the earth. So, if you go up, you go to your friend's house, she has a cognitive image of where you are. She can place you. And she could not place me where I was going. So, I'm trying to explain to her where it is, and I can see New York and Louisiana on the map, but that space had no meaning to me. So I didn't know if that was a 3-hour drive or a 20-hour drive. That space, I had no concept for that distance. So Danette shows up in a Crown, she rented a car, Crown Victoria, Danette and Darlene, and they were law students at the time. And so at the time they were old, adults. Now looking back, they were really young. So they're in law school at the time, and they showed up with 2 of their friends from law school. So I get in the car and they start driving. And I remember thinking, wow, this is so beautiful. And I was talking about I-95, because I had never been on an interstate before. In New York City, there is no interstate that runs through the city. So it was the first time, the only time you can see something like what you see on an interstate, which is, trees for a long extended period of time, is Central Park or Prospect Park. But, you can't sit in the car for hours and see that. The other thing I remember was we stopped in Maryland, and I remember thinking, wow, this is a long way. And we were 4 hours into the trip, and we had 20 hours left. So they drive 24 hours straight. We get to Monroe, Louisiana, which is 30 miles outside of Grambling. And we spend the night, and it's my first time outside of Brooklyn, New York, the urbanness of New York. And I could remember thinking, okay, there are no Asian Americans, there are no Hispanics. I see black and white people, but they look different from the black and white people in New York. Very different. It was just, they sounded, the way they spoke was different. It was just a difference. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm not in New York anymore. And so we spend the night in the hotel in Monroe. Then we, next day, get up, drive 30 miles over, get to Grambling. Danette takes me to my dorm room, check me in. Darlene comes back and says, okay, see, so you fill this form out for your coursework, and then you fill this form out for your financial aid, and then here's a campus map, and you take the form to this building, and they spent, they stayed on campus with me for about 45 minutes. They gave me $30. They said, this is all we have, and then they got back in the car and drove from New York. And I was dropped off at Grambling, northern rural Grambling, Louisiana. And I remember thinking, wow, at the time I knew it was a big sacrifice that they had made. I thought, I said, I'll pay you back, some way. And they said, oh, just do well and pay it forward. God will take care of the rest. But I thought, okay, So they head back. So I'm at Grambling. So I majored in psychology because I thought that you could read people's minds if you major in psychology. I realized that's not the case. And so at Grambling, I did relatively well, and I graduated with 3.2 GPA. I remember the one thing that turned around for me academically was my first class, Intro Psychology. The professor gave an example. He said, if you want to describe to someone, if you want to say, look, Billy's being bad, he's misbehaving. He says, you can simply tell someone Billy's misbehaving. He says, or you can tell them, in the past hour, Billy has kicked 3 kids, punched 4 others, and slapped 5. And something clicked. It was like, wow. So you don't have to rely on me saying that he's misbehaving. I'm setting the parameters and telling you what he did during that time, and you then determine whether or not that's misbehavior, how much misbehavior that is. You then are able to decide because I've given you the data. And that changed how I view the world from then on. You know, there was a period of time where I was really terrible, where anytime I would have a conversation with someone, I always wanted them to define what they were talking about. What do you mean? I wanted them to define, so-and-so is nice. What does that mean? Nice. Tell me, you know, I wanted indicators of what nice was. So I graduated from Grambling, and I applied to graduate school, and Kansas State was the only school to accept me. So I went to Kansas State for a master's in sociology. And then I applied to PhD programs, and Michigan was the only school to accept me. You only need one, though. That's all that matters. So I went to Michigan, and I completed the PhD in public policy and sociology. And when I finished the program, I took a postdoc at Michigan. And while I was in that postdoc, I was then recruited by UT Austin. So I went to UT Austin, and in my first year there on the faculty, I was recruited by Princeton and NYU. And so NYU, ironic, you know, anyway, the one school in New York that I knew about besides LIU and Brooklyn. So long story short, I ended up going to Princeton. So I've been at Princeton for 5 years now. So what's the moral of this story? So first is that looking back on, you know, my grades in high school and, you know, my performance then and where I am now, it reminds me of, you know, that even though it wasn't a high probability that I would be where I am, it was still possible. And so one thing that I like for people to keep in mind is that you have to distinguish between what's probable and what's possible. And so this is important because for teachers in the classroom, you may come across a student who is struggling, who's not doing well, and while the probability is not high that they're gonna, you know, go to medical school, you never really know. You know, you never really know. The other thing that I, you know, think one can take from this story is that I think for this group in particular, you guys comprise the high end of the distribution in terms of achievement. All right, so you have, you know, low achievers, average achievers, and then the very top. And I think that's a powerful position to be in. And so there was a movie where was it Spider-Man, where they said with great power comes, with great strength comes great responsibility, or something like that. Okay, so I'm quoting Spider-Man. I think that's true. And so you're going to be in situations where you're going to come across people who are not fortunate to be in the situations that you're in. Struggling students who are not doing as well academically. And I think you should never take for granted what you have earned and the position that you've attained. You should never take that for granted, because at some point you have a chance to be someone's Danette or Darlene, which means that you can, you never know, you might say something to someone that can completely alter the trajectory of their lives and put them on a completely different path. And so for me, it was, you know, Danette and Darlene. Had they not taken an interest in me, my life would have been totally different. There's no way I probably would have been an embalmer in Brooklyn, which nothing wrong with that, but very different life. And so I think that for this group, you're in a position where you have a chance to, you're going to be in a position, you're probably going to be in positions of influence as you guys leave Washington and Lee, and you're going to have a chance to pay it forward. You're going to have a chance to be influential in someone's life. And so that's something that, you know, you never know whose life you can change. And so that's something that I want to leave you with, that I hope that you take that responsibility, take on that responsibility to try to influence other people's lives in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thank you for sharing that thought-provoking talk. We're very pleased you were able to be here with us today. I'd just like to thank all of you who've joined us here to honor our initiates. Before we adjourn, I do want to add a special word of thanks to Secretary-Treasurer Janet Ikeda, Vice President Julie Campbell, in the back somewhere, Administrative Assistants Jennifer Ashworth and Barbara Higgins and Debbie Hattersley in the Registrar's Office. The 5 of them have done a tremendous amount of work to make this day possible. I'm truly grateful, and we should all be grateful for their assistance. Initiates, please stay for a moment at the end just for a quick picture after this ceremony. And with that, this Phi Beta Kappa Society of the Cincinnati Convocation is now concluded.